the Gold Star card because it's marked with a gold star. If it meets those federal requirements, you will not be allowed to fly on a commercial jetliner. You will not be able to enter federal buildings. You will not be able to enter a nuclear facility and any other purpose that the Secretary of DHS, that would be Janet Napolitano of the Telescreen Walmart fame, any other purpose that she deems appropriate, meaning it's open-ended. She can add checking, your banking, anything she wants, and which is terribly concerning. So just to give you an idea, they passed this in 2005. 26 states, as of right now, either have passed a law or a resolution, but in some way formalized their opposition to Real ID. And a lot of people, myself included, thought, well, we've got it licked because that's historic. That many states to get together and say, nope, we're not doing it. Well, no such luck. But Florida is one of the states that actively, openly embraced it, and they're moving on with it. And to show you how it's a very complicated law, there's a lot to it, but to show you, to give you an idea on a human level, how this law looks, feels, sounds, and smells. Tell me about the gentleman, I believe a World War II veteran who fought on our side for us, was having trouble with getting his papers in order. You probably know more about that than I do. Paul, can you tell us about that?
Yes, Kay. He was a resident of Washington State. Keep in mind, there are two states that have what are called enhanced driver's licenses. Now, these things already have an RFID chip in them, Washington State and New York State. Now, they both have a border with Canada. So this gentleman, age 95, he was born in Canada, but his parents were American citizens. That's the key thing. If you look at the federal law on this, if American citizens, say, are visiting or vacationing in Canada, and they have a child, that child is an American citizen. Now, they didn't immediately register him as they were required to do or whatever the case was, but that doesn't change the underlying facts. And, of course, way back when, the paper trail, thank God, wasn't what it is today. And so they didn't have birth certificates or whatever. And so this guy, just for year after year after year, had a driver's license in Washington State. They knew who he was. They know who he is. There's no question about that. And now he's been hard-timed and actually threatened with, if you try, we might actually deport you because you're not an American citizen. And what type of foolishness is that?
Oh, my goodness, I didn't know that. That's awful. So he wants to go and travel across the border, and the enhanced driver's license, as you mentioned, have an RFID chip in them, allows you to travel as if it were a passport over the border.
Correct.
And so he went and see, when you go and get your Real ID card or your Gold Star card, and I'm hearing many stories come out of Florida, people that are in their 70s and 80s that don't have their birth certificate or don't have their marriage license. And listen, ladies, if you've been married, as I understand it, even if you didn't change your name, you have got to have those original marriage certificates to legitimize, all the convolutions in your life. And they will scan those documents and put them into a database. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's our main point of opposition to this whole mess, is that electronic database and the scanning of documents. Because I'm pretty sure that you all are going to know what this says, but the Fourth Amendment says we've got the right to be secure in several areas: houses, papers, persons, effects. And the state, and I know this as a policeman, a former retired policeman, they cannot just arbitrarily take private property from you. There has to be due process. They have to show or get a warrant. If there's no consent from me, they have to have a warrant to do so. And what do you need to get a warrant? 2 words: reasonable cause. And that is what is sorely missing in Real ID. It's sorely missing in this prescription legislation they're wanting to pass now. It's sorely missing in the septic evaluation legislation they've already passed. And this Florida state is just turning into a police state. It's incredible.
It's mind-blowing. And I think I put an article up or made a comment that you're talking about the prescription database, so that whatever prescription you fill or get will be available for, obviously, other pharmacies and doctors and things like that, but will it be available to law enforcement as well?
Guess who controls this database, Kaye? Florida. It's a state database.
Then there you go.
The bill number's HB 7095. I'm not making this stuff up. I've read it. I've commented on it.
No, we've got it going on here too. And you had actually, and let me see if I can remember his name. I know you will know this story. I followed it very closely. In fact, I would like to contact this gentleman and have him on. He moved, I believe it was to Florida. Yes, it was, from New Jersey. He was a lawyer, had been in an awful wreck and had all sorts of disabilities and was in a wheelchair and in terrible chronic pain. And he took opiates for that pain. Well, they tracked him, and he actually came on my blog and commented when I was writing about this that the database had a lot to do with it and how dangerous it was. But this gentleman ended up in prison where they gave him actually a higher amount of opiates than he was taking on the outside because he was very carefully trying to manage the amount he worked. He was a lawyer. And because of they decided that the amount of drugs that it was shown that he was taking was too much for any individual to take. They just started following him and surveilling him. And even though they didn't find any evidence of it, they tried him and convicted him of intent to distribute or something. Now, there was public outcry over that. In fact, I think Neil Bortz, when I listened to Neil Bortz a few years ago, was taking up that cause, and I followed that, and he did get released. You know what I'm talking about there?
I'm not familiar with that case, no, but
I'll come back around to that later. But it had something to do with the tracking database.
Right, is that there is no reasonable cause to believe anybody is involved in any criminal activity. What we're trying to do, I linked a couple of articles to you there earlier, Kay, on Facebook, and I know you read them. I caught one of our most wanted fugitives in 2003. I did not do that by requiring everybody in the state of Washington to provide their personal data to me. I did what's called old-fashioned police work. I asked questions, I interviewed people, I tracked this guy down, and the sheriff out there found him and arrested him on our fugitive warrant. I've worked an identity theft case that I linked there as well. The fellow was found up in Baltimore, Maryland. He found another guy's driver's license and assumed his identity because they looked somewhat alike. And again, didn't require everybody in the state of Florida to come in and say, my name's not Larry Caracosta. I just followed narrowly and specifically because I had cause to investigate. I had a victim of identity theft come in who actually had been turned away by the sheriff. And I prosecuted the case, investigated it, and prosecuted it through the Office of Statewide Prosecution. And that's how things should be. We have to have reasonable cause that a crime has been committed. We can't just arbitrarily have people come in. I've been talking about the red light cameras down here in Florida a lot. I don't want to get off the track too much. But the point that I made was, with the way this law is written, we've done away with the Fifth and Sixth Amendment about self-incrimination and about confronting witnesses. So why not just do away with the Fourth while we're at it? We'll search everybody, anytime, any place. Because these cameras are done in the name of safety. That's what all the politics and government people tell us. If we do away with the Fourth Amendment, we can search and get all these guns and drugs and everything off the street. Just think how much safer we'll be then. Tongue strictly in cheek.
Worth much in an America that doesn't respect individual liberty. That's something that is exceptional about the United States. And, so you're telling me as a law enforcement officer, a former retired law enforcement officer who did investigation, that you're not just salivating over the idea of having all of this information available to you. Please explain why not.
Well, it goes back to those people I was telling you about. My dad was one of those people. He passed away a couple years ago. But that's the way that I was raised. You had respect for other people. You had respect for the law. And that's how I always worked as a policeman. Something I just wrote about here recently was I got called to a DUI crash, supposedly, and the guy was drunk, and he had pulled up into one of his neighbor's yards and parked his car. Well, there was nothing damaged, nobody injured, and I had 20 people, basically a lynch mob there. Arrest this guy, he's drunk. Well, the law says I can't arrest him because I didn't see him drive, and he's not involved in a crash. He didn't damage anything, nobody's injured. And I'm not going to violate the law to enforce the law. So that's what it comes down to, is the decision that's made. And I saw in my career, unfortunately, too many people, they would read you have the right to remain silent and so forth, and the person would say, well, I'd like to speak to an attorney. And at that point, I wouldn't say word one further because they've invoked their right to counsel. But I saw, fortunately, just a handful in my time, to where, well, you'd better talk to us now because if you don't, talk to us now, it's not going to work out good for you, and just try and coerce them into talking. And, I've never been of that persuasion. The Constitution, the rule of law is there for a reason.